Hi, it's Chris with Implied Music. Crunch. Crunch in chords, in chord voicings, in sonic textures. There's a couple of ways to achieve it that don't come from distortion pedals. It's about harmonic complexity, dissonance. Well, let's take a look at it today. It's hard to talk about harmony. It's hard to talk about chords without using very academic musical language or descriptive language like, oh, that's really soft or that's spicy. So I very often find myself using words from other sensorial sort of medium, right? And I'm not alone. When I'm working with directors, they very often don't have any musical language at all. I get asked for things that are spicy, that have to do with food, for instance. And I often will hear the expression crunchy. Well, crunchy is something that musicians will say too. And what they mean is always the types of chords that have something like seconds in them. That's a C major 7 voicing, and it's crunchy. It's crunchy because that dissonant minor second creates a bit of a friction. Yeah, that friction's really important. Now, you remember that in any given scale, and we can pick a major or a minor scale. Let's try the C major triads. All of these intervals are either perfect consonant intervals or imperfect consonant intervals. Those consonant intervals, until you get to the 7th degree, where you get the tritone, which wants to resolve, don't have a heck of a lot of crunch in them. And so what arrangers have done over the years is built up the technique of adding tones or replacing tones. For instance, this C triad can be made crunchy and suspended by changing the middle note E to D. The D wants to move to E. Most people's ears hear this. The same thing can happen here. This E, the middle note, could be replaced with an F, and that F wants to move down. We don't have to move, though, and that's where it comes from. For instance, C9, F9, G9, C6. There wound up being a bunch of major seconds in there. And those major seconds are what give us crunch. They are momentary dissonances, which tend to just kind of like move freely into the next beat. There are a bunch of rules about dissonances. We've talked about preparing dissonances and all that entails. But in this case, we're just hopping freely from one slightly tense sound to another. And if we're careful about the notes we choose, we can get great results. I want to show you examples of a couple of things that I've got prepared here. All right. First of all, I want to talk about string writing, because in string writing, we see this kind of thing all the time. Orchestral writing uses a kind of a breathing effect, a kind of a condensation or compaction, and then release. And here in the very first example, a tense major second releases and then adds a minor second, which resolves to a triad, adds a major second, which resolves to a sus, which resolves to a major third. And let's look at that more slowly. A major second, and this tone is a suspension, essentially, of the F. These two tones continue, and we add the E. In other words, this opens out, and then we add the E to add tension, crunchy, and then it resolves down from the E to the D, and we get a nice old D triad, but that doesn't last long. The A on top descends. Everything moving one note at a time. It's very parsimonious and only moving by steps too. Second opens out, Seconds opens out, collapses, opens down, and finally resolves. This is a classic example of suspensions resolving down, but they don't have to resolve down. This minor second opens up. And then the bottom note chases, top note moves up, bottom note chases. And then they resolve outwards to a surprise resolution on the A flat major. So the overall effect there is one of sort of a startled kind of resolution that's still quite uplifting. There are some gorgeous examples of this kind of string writing out there. We've talked about coupling in the past. Here's an example of a very simple melody coupled with seconds underneath it. Now, parallel fifths, but the second underneath, creating a parallel sixth, somehow validates the sound. A kind of a weird, almost atonal melody. But there's a crunch to it, and that crunch makes everything feel a little more sophisticated. This is a dense sound. Because the major seconds create overtones which battle each other, our ear gets real excited by it. Let's look at how we can use this in horns. So here's my little jazz horn melody. And you might recognize it's sort of just a simple kind of G minor 7 sound. And the melody itself kind of just outlines the chord with a little blue note in there, right? Now, horns love to play seconds at the bottom, and you can crunch them right up together. In fact, let's quickly look at what we have here in the second example. I'm going to open this out a bit so it's even easier to visualize. The melody itself is the top note. So I have ya, ba, 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 ba. Sorry, that's high for me. But you get the idea. And then underneath it, parallel fourths or thirds with seconds coupled to it. Some people call this planing, where everything's moving in the same direction. And I'm not afraid of condensing the arrangement. Seconds here, seconds in the middle. That's a stack of 2 seconds right next to each other, G, A, B flat all together. It sounds terrific. And that density proceeds into the next phrase with seconds either in the middle or at the bottom. Minor seconds, no problem, until the last moment where we have a very open G minor 9 chord. And look how I've voiced it, 7, 9, 5, 1. In other words, the tense notes are at the bottom. And this is a great way to voice your horns. Well, listen to this arrangement. Classic big band sound. One more time. Aside from the sample library being, okay, just okay, that's a great sound and would sound terrific if you handed it out to trumpet saxes, maybe trombone on the bottom. There's a classic sax section arranging technique too. You notice how I left the top note kind of in the clear for the high lead trumpet, so it really pops out. You don't want to cloud that high trumpet player's tone. You want to give that sort of, the screamer in the band, you want to give them a nice clear place to play. Well, crunch is a really important part of arranging. You can get some super textures, exciting textures, stimulating your ear. It's terrific when you have a simple melody to create stacks like we just did with the horns, but it also propels subtle dynamic string writing to move forward as you kind of like go in and out of tension and resolution of contracted sound and then an expanded sound, condensing and expanding. Hope this has been useful. Like and subscribe, ding the bell. You'll be notified when I do my videos if you do. I'll see you next time.